So my name is Matt Janson. Like Susie said, I'm a fish and wildlife biologist with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service right here in Reno, Nevada. It is my pleasure to be here presenting to you all tonight. Have a little bit of information on the status of yellow-billed cuckoos in Nevada. They are threatened species, so we won't have anything too specific about where to find one. They're very difficult to locate, and they are in severe danger in Nevada. So the Fish and Wildlife Service cooperates with a number of other agencies to protect this species, including the BLM, Nevada Department of Wildlife, the Bureau of Reclamation, some tribes, and other nonprofit groups. So it's a collaborative effort. It's not anything that just one agency can do on its own, but there is also a benefit from the public participating and being knowledgeable about cuckoos. If you do report a sighting, we would love to hear about it. My business card is on the back table with my email and my phone number. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to move along. So first, I just want to introduce the idea of what is a cuckoo. And this is a nice collection of the top bird nerds in Reno. So I figured I had to give a little bit of a taxonomic update on the cuckoos. So they're pretty unique. They're not a songbird. A lot of them superficially resemble songbirds. However, they're not passerines. They're in their own order called the Cuckooliformes. And there's one family in this order with about 147 species. And they're found on 6 continents, so every continent except Antarctica. I think there's a map there that sort of shows you, in North America, they do extend into southern Canada during the summer months. And then they're found throughout Eurasia, as well as on Australia, New Zealand, and on many islands in Oceania. So they're a pretty widespread order of birds. They're very unique, and they are related most closely to bustards and turacos, which are only found in the Old World. So as far as them being in the New World, that's kind of unique that they're in North America and Central and South America. You can see they also have a wide diversity of shapes and forms. Up top is the channel-billed cuckoo. That's a species that breeds in Australia, and then it actually crosses the Torres Strait and spends the winter in New Guinea. The African emerald cuckoo is one of the really brightly colored cuckoos of Southern Asia and Africa that are actually sexually dimorphic. So that means the male and the female look different. Our cuckoos here in North America, the male and female, they're pretty much indistinguishable in the field. But some species in the Old World are sexually dimorphic, including the common cuckoo, which is more subtle than the African emerald cuckoo, but I wanted to mention that one since it's probably the most famous cuckoo species, and it's like the inspiration behind the cuckoo clocks from Bavaria and Switzerland. It's also well known as a brood parasite. So the Old World cuckoos are brood parasites, just like the brown-headed cowbird here in North America. That means that they are laying their eggs in another bird's nest and kind of abandoning their chick-rearing duties to that other species. So common cuckoos parasitize a number of species, particularly warblers, orioles, all sorts of breeding birds on the European continent. So cuckoos here in North America are generally not brood parasites. The yellow-billed cuckoo build their own nest and raise their own young. Both parents will be doing that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But I just wanted to give y'all an idea of what are cuckoos and just share some of the other members of the family from around the world that we would never see in Nevada. But cuckoo conservation is a global concern, not just here in Nevada. 13% of those species are at risk. So that's a category that's been devised by the IUCN to determine the conservation needs of various species, various taxa. 2 species have already gone extinct in modern times. Both of these are endemic to islands. The St. Helena cuckoo, it's actually only known from one subfossil that was found on the island. We don't know what it looks like, but they did, an artist did make a rendering of it for the postage stamps of St. Helena. So you can see that up there. Just took some artistic license and designed this cuckoo, which we don't know what it really looked like since, like I said, it only has a fossil humerus. It was extinct due to invasive species and the wholesale destruction of the forest on St. Helena following its discovery by European explorers in the 1500s. So that kind of demonstrates the fragility of these island ecosystems. There's also another island-dwelling cuckoo, which is down there on the bottom left. That's a specimen from a museum in Germany. It's called the Yellow-billed Cuckoo. It went extinct due to invasive rats and the overcollection for scientific purposes. Yeah, they were very fashionable to collect, you know, in the Victorian era, everyone wanted a cuckoo in their closet, so to speak. So that was very fashionable to have a collection of natural history items in your home at that time. And so these fell victim to that fad, actually. However, a lot of the species are considered least concern. That's about 79% of them. I will tell you the yellow-billed cuckoo as a global population is doing fine. If you've ever been to Eastern United States, they're relatively common there. But in the Western US, it's a totally different story. And that's why in 2014, it was actually afforded threatened status under the Endangered Species Act. So that's where we get involved as the federal agency that's responsible for regulating endangered and threatened species. Okay, so enough about the other cuckoos. Let's talk about the ones that live right here in Nevada. You may be surprised to know that we do have 3 species in Nevada. One of them is very rare, but the other 2 are regularly found. 2 are regular breeders, the greater roadrunner, which obviously can't be found around Reno on a routine basis. We're a little bit too cold, but once you get into the Mojave Desert south of Tonopah and around Las Vegas, you can see there's that map on the right is demonstrating their distribution in southern Nevada. You've also maybe seen one in New Mexico or Texas or Southern California where they're quite common and quite ubiquitous. There is also the group-billed ani. Anis are cuckoos. They're sort of a unique group of cuckoos that are found only in the New World. They're very tropical. So we do occasionally get some group-billed anis that visit Nevada from Mexico. And they're, unlike the other cuckoos, they're very gregarious and you might see them in groups if you ever go to the tropics. They're pretty common there. But the other cuckoos are solitary, including the yellow-billed and the roadrunner. So yes, you're unlikely to see a group-billed ani in Nevada, but one did show up in Las Vegas last year. And when I did a little research, there's some other records in southern
Matt,
Nevada.
is the group-billed ani also a cuckoo?
Yes, it is. It is. It is a cuckoo in North America that's really usually just found in Florida. Okay, so oh, here's a picture I took of a cuckoo 2 weeks ago. It wasn't in Nevada though, it was in Alabama. At Dauphin Island, where we were getting a nice fallout conditions on the Gulf, and you know, cuckoos are nocturnal migrants, but they don't like flying in the rain because their feathers are not very waterproof. So sometimes you'll see them after it rains, like holding their wings out like a cormorant to dry their feathers. So we had conditions were just right where thousands of migrants were crossing the Gulf and a storm came in the morning. So we were at the right spot to see dozens and dozens of yellow-billed cuckoos. So this was just one that was posing really nicely in a wild grade. So it was listed in 2014. The cuckoo was actually petitioned, I believe, in 1999 or 2000. So you can see we worked really quickly at the Fish and Wildlife Service. By 2014, we had finally decided that this was going to be warranted as a listable entity under what's called the DPS. So that stands for Distinct Population Segment. It's part of the Endangered Species Act that allows vertebrate taxa to be listed in a portion of their range. So it doesn't apply to plants or invertebrates, but it does apply to vertebrates, like cuckoo, of course, is vertebrate. And the protections afforded the cuckoo are from West Texas to the Pacific coast. All 12 of those Western states, in whole or part, the cuckoo is protected as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. It's also protected in southwestern British Columbia and in 6 Mexican states in the Northwest. So we do have the ability to list species. Obviously, our enforcement is greatest in the United States, but you can also list foreign species under the Endangered Species Act. So that's kind of where you get a couple of international jurisdictions are also afforded protection by what's called the distinct population segment. So it's listed as threatened, and you might say, well, what's the difference between threatened and endangered? If you're familiar with conservation, if you're familiar with sort of what we do here at the Fish and Wildlife Service. So endangered means that this species is at risk of extinction in the foreseeable future. Threatened kind of takes it one time step back and says this species is in danger of becoming endangered within the near future. So it's not likely to become extinct within the foreseeable future, but if we don't do anything about it, it could reach that point relatively soon. So that's the distinction between threatened and endangered. Sometimes that can be a little bit of a confusing concept, and it is sort of semantic. It's right there in Section 3, Subpart 20 of the Endangered Species Act of 1973, if you want to check it out. All right. So what was going on out here that in the Western states, this bird needed to be listed? You may know, or if you've birded in the Eastern states, they're relatively common in forested areas. You know, in the South where I grew up, they call them a rain crow because in the afternoon they'll start calling and then a thunderstorm, you know, it's humid down there and there's a thunderstorm almost every day all summer long. And so they say, oh, that rain crow brought the rain, and that's just a yellow-billed cuckoo calling. So there's more intact forest, there's just more breeding habitat for them in the Eastern US. When you get west of the 100th meridian, you know, precipitation declines, you have a desert environment out here. And there's really only trees and deciduous trees, which is what cuckoos need in Nevada in specific areas. Riparian habitats in Nevada have been under threat for a number of years, basically since the earliest settlers came and they thought, well, maybe these cottonwoods would be good for firewood. They're not. Maybe these cottonwoods would be good for building a structure. They're also not. They're very weak and poor wood quality. So what's the best thing to do with the cottonwood? Leave it be and let it be bird habitat. So damming of rivers, this actually is on the Kern River. That's Isabella Lake there. And that project in Southern California, it did destroy a lot of really, really good cuckoo habitat just east of Bakersfield. So those kinds of hydrological projects and improvements to the Western rivers and all of these various things that were required to sustain a large human population in the West were actually not beneficial to the yellow-billed cuckoo. I'm sure y'all can imagine. Overgrazing is also a problem. You know, if cattle start to get into the riparian area, you're going to have the destruction of saplings and you won't get any recruitment of those cottonwoods. They're not going to mature. And then when the older cottonwoods die, the habitat is going to be at a degraded level. Invasion of tamarisk, you may be familiar with tamarisk. It's a little bit more common in southern Nevada. We do have some in northern Nevada, and I expect it will only get more with the climate change and warming temperatures. It's a species from the old world. It's down here. Sort of not a great picture, but there in the bottom left corner, there's some tamarisk growing along the riparian area in Utah. And it just outcompetes native species like willows and cottonwoods that our native birds, including the yellow-billed cuckoo, rely on. Insecticide use. So yellow-billed cuckoos are pretty reliant on insects as a major part of their diet, especially for feeding their young birds. Like they need all the protein that they can get. So, you know, feeding a youngin, they're going to go for an insect over something like fruit that doesn't have as much protein. So there's a variety of threats. These are the 5 threats that were actually analyzed by the Fish and Wildlife Service and determined that the cuckoo warranted this threatened status. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about their life history. So they're what's called a neotropical migrant. The neotropics are the tropics that are found in the New World. And so the map demonstrates their range. The blue is their winter range, which is mostly South America. a lot of the Western cuckoos, they've done some radio telemetry, and nowadays even the GPS transmitter data has been acquired from cuckoo studies, and a lot of the ones that have been captured in Arizona and New Mexico are actually spending the winter in Paraguay and northeastern Argentina. So they're going down to the southern edge of that blue colored area on the map. You can see their distribution in the western US is very patchy and kind of clustered along some riparian areas, whereas in the eastern United States and southern Ontario, it's a lot more widespread. There's also a breeding population on the Yucatan Peninsula and in a lot of the greater Antilles. So they're going to be coming back to North America in April, May, depending on how far south you are. In Nevada, it really is June usually. Like the cuckoos really probably aren't even back quite yet. They don't spend a whole lot of time here. They're going to be doing that migration twice a year. So it's, a perilous journey. There you can run into a wind turbine, a solar farm, cats that people are letting outside, buildings. So that's a high period of mortality for cuckoos. But once they get here, they're a generalist omnivore. So that means that they're going to be feeding on basically anything they can get their bills on. Frogs, reptiles, fruit, a lot of insects. They really like tank caterpillars. That's why I have a picture of the tank caterpillars up there too. And they do like cicadas. So actually it will probably be a really good year for cuckoos in the central and midwestern United States, because they probably have heard that there's the 2 broods of cicadas coming out at once this year. So out here, they're pretty picky about their habitat. They need riparian gallery forests, so like older cottonwood forests that are found along rivers in Nevada. I will tell you the Carson River probably has the most pristine remaining example, but there were formerly along every river. The Truckee River actually has a pretty good restoration of line going on. If you go out east of Lockwood to McCarran Ranch, that's a great spot to see some work that the Nature Conservancy did in collaboration with other partners to restore the Truckee River riparian area. And at one time it did have cuckoos. I'm hoping that one day we'll get them back. And no one has found one there yet, but no one has done a lot of survey effort. So they need that riparian gallery forest. That's their habitat. So what is going on with the breeding season for cuckoos, specifically in Nevada? This information is specific to Nevada. In the eastern United States, they come back a lot earlier. So it's one of our migrants that's the latest to arrive and first to leave. So they really would rather hang out in Paraguay than at Lahan Reservoir. But in Nevada, we start surveying in mid-June. They're going to be arriving in late May, mid-June even. Some year, I think last year, we didn't even hear a cuckoo until the middle of July. They were probably there earlier, but we had a relatively cold winter and wet, and so maybe they took their migration a little bit slow. The breeding activity in this state and in the northern part of the state particularly peaks in July. In southern Nevada, you can sometimes get a little bit of activity even into August. But the cuckoos have an extremely rapid development for an altricial bird species. So altricial means that they're born naked and helpless and blind. This one is actually a few days old. It already has its pin feathers coming off. Whereas a precocial bird is like when you think of the chicks, like when you go to Ace Hardware and they're in that pin, those are very young. They're just precocial birds. The gallinaceous birds are precocious, so they come out of the egg ready to go. A cuckoo doesn't, like most birds. So by late August, the cuckoos have already matured and are ready to start heading on their southward migration. Usually we'll get 3 to 5 eggs, but it's, nature is tough. It's good if there's 1 or 2 young that come out of the nest. And it only takes 17 days for a young cuckoo to go from egg to fledging. That's the quickest turnaround of any altricial North American bird. So they have really, there's not a lot of time, there's limited resources in the Great Basin Desert, and they are using a very compact time window to grow and get moving because they want to get back down to South America.
So I can't hear it.
Yeah, right. My apologies for that. So basically to summarize, the cuckoos are here for a very, very brief window. 17 days, they are ready to go and they may linger. You know, we will get cuckoo reports into mid-August in northern Nevada and in southern Nevada and Arizona. September, particularly in Arizona, they will stay until October. And then they're on their way. Our cuckoos here, they're gonna be migrating just through western Mexico, probably down the Sierra Madre. The cuckoos in the eastern United States are trans-Gulf migrants, so they're gonna get down to the Gulf and Alabama, Louisiana, and then they're gonna make the trip to the Yucatan in one night. Maybe a little bit over one night. I think it usually takes them about 30 or 35 hours if they don't find any adverse weather. And of course their fall migration is hurricane season, so it's a risky endeavor. All right, but how about right here in Nevada? I have a beautiful picture of their habitat on the Carson River. That's an excellent example of a gallery forest that has some native willows as the understory and then a lot of tall Vermont cottonwoods. That's our dominant species of cottonwood out in the Great Basin deserts. So they're more common in southern Nevada. You know, there's some tributaries of the Colorado River there that have permanent flow, such as the Virgin in southeastern Nevada. Those are probably some of the best places to see cuckoos in the state. There's also the Pahranagat Valley, which you can see as the collection of dots a little bit northeast of Las Vegas. There's cuckoos at isolated desert oases too. We've received reports of them at Locks Ranch, which is a really remote desert oasis in Railroad Valley in central Nevada, east of Tonopah. And we also have them at Ash Meadows National Wildlife Refuge, down near Pahrump in southern Nevada. They're also on the Amargosa and Las Vegas Wash, but up in northern Nevada, our most recent reliable reports are on the Walker River, the east fork of the Walker, and also on the Carson River. So at one time, they lived on all of the major rivers. I don't have a lot of reports from the Humboldt, but since they do live along the Snake in Idaho, I wouldn't see why they would not live on the Humboldt River in historical times when there was more flow and more riparian habitat, especially on the lower reaches, kind of between Winnemucca and Lovelock. So eventually we're hoping that the Truckee River restoration will benefit this species. Obviously, it's already benefiting a number of riparian species, but for some of these keystone species like a cuckoo that require a mature forest, it could take a little bit longer. So then I'll tell y'all kind of like what I do and what I'm involved with in the cuckoos. We do have an official survey protocol that was developed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, mainly the Arizona office, because they're the most cuckoos in the West. Arizona and New Mexico have the greatest concentration of them. So it's a call and response survey. So what that means is that we will play the playback for the cuckoos, and then we wait for a response. So it's for permitted surveyors only because they are a protected species. It's actually illegal to play playback for a cuckoo in those 12 Western states, unless you're permitted to be doing it as part of official survey. We do 3 visits from late June to late July. If we do have a confirmed detection, we'll try to go back out in August to actually locate the young, like the first week of August. Last year, we weren't able to do that because the Carson River was so high. We did get our first 3 in though. So these surveys are critical to informing our knowledge of the distribution of cuckoos in Nevada. And there you can see on the left, that is part of the riparian zone on the Carson River near Silver Springs, and you can see how much water we had to contend with. So it was kind of like a knee-boot cuckoo survey. I'm gonna try to go onto the Cornell Lab of Ornithology website and see if we can look. Says.
So the question about surveys.
Yes.
In what kind of, distance do you go, say you're along the Carson River?
Yeah.
And you say, okay, like I'm choosing this one, and then.
So there's predetermined sites that the survey lead has picked out, and in this case, that's the Nevada Department of Wildlife. And it's at least every 200 meters though, because you want to be seeing, like, if you're in an area with high cuckoo density, you would want to be going to the next territory. Although their territories can be quite large and a square kilometer or even larger. Yeah. All right, Diane's gonna help me here. I wanted y'all to hear a cuckoo. Excellent. Okay, thanks. So here is what's the song. They put song in quotes because they're not songbirds technically.
Doesn't sound like a cuckoo song.
No, yeah, the cuckoo clock is the common cuckoo in Europe. And then this is their call, which is probably the most likely thing that you're gonna hear. It does kind of sound like a flicker.
Yeah.
I'll play a different one. At the end, when they're going, yeah, go. That's kind of different than a flicker. Okay, let me get back to my slideshow. Okay. So now, like, you would want folks to be trained biologists that are familiar with the song and the call of the cuckoo before you go out. And we got started, you can get started 30 minutes before sunrise. So you can imagine that's fun driving from Reno at 3:30 in the morning down USA Parkway to get out there, but it's all very rewarding once you're out there. So the survey team is the lead surveyor is actually the Nevada Department of Wildlife. They get something called Section 6 funds, which are administered by the Endangered Species Act. It empowers the federal government to give federal dollars to states to basically help us administer the Endangered Species Act. So Nevada Department of Wildlife does coordinate the surveys. We are a partner as well as the Bureau of Land Management and the Bureau of Reclamation because they control the water level on the Carson River. So they are a really important ally to have on board with our Carson River Yellow-billed Cuckoo survey efforts. Okay, so what are we usually doing out there? That's our crew. It's really mostly, we're gonna play our playback and then wait and wait. And cuckoos are kind of cagey. A lot of times they're gonna wait and to respond. They're a little bit shy, especially the Western ones. They're very much more shy than the ones back east. And they'll watch you, and they also will, they're not like a warbler that's always flitting around. They will sit, they'll just sit on a perch. So you might hear them, but if they have a perch that they like, get in all the leaves, they might not necessarily come in. So you do have to be very patient. And then, like I said, you'll go 200 meters and then you'll have your next survey point. So it's a lot of waiting and a lot of listening. And I will tell y'all, it took us 18 hours before we finally heard a cuckoo last summer. So that was over 3 days, like you're out there for all morning. And then at the very end, not only did we hear one, we actually saw a pair. So that was a really good indication that they are probably breeding on the Carson River. Only one cuckoo nest has actually ever been found in Nevada, and I believe it's on the Virgin River. So they are here in the state. They're present in extremely low numbers. And in northern Nevada especially, I get the feeling that we're getting a very slight increase in numbers compared to some of the historical data. It could be just that there's improved survey effort. We're going out on the Carson River. We have Walker Basin Conservancy is going out on the Walker River. So there's more folks going out, and like y'all know, if you've been birding, the more you go out, the more you're likely to see. So that might be the correlation instead of the absence of them for an extended period of time. But either way, it is good news that there's still a few around and they're persisting in low numbers in the state.
They just do the song in the early morning.
No, they'll actually call throughout the day. The early morning is the best time. They're the most active, especially on like a really hot day, out in Fallon, it can get to 105 or 110 pretty routinely. So for the purpose of the survey, it doesn't matter, like only thing we're segregating it by in our data is an audio detection or a visual detection. We could make a note if it was a song or a call probably, but it doesn't matter. They both kind of serve the same purpose. Both sexes will sing and call, unlike in songbirds when oftentimes the male is the only one that will sing. Cuckoos, the male will sing and do the coo, coo, that sound, and then the female can respond to it. So the male will do it in the beginning of the season and then later, like as a courtship, but they mate for life. So once they arrive, they might have wintered in different places, but once the pair has returned to the Carson River or wherever they're breeding, and they found each other for the breeding season, they can just use that to communicate. And in Nevada, we have a really low density of cuckoos, so I'd be a little bit surprised if like an interloper showed up. Yeah, so it's very rare. In 2020, the US Fish and Wildlife Service estimated the population in the entire state to be less than 10 breeding pairs. Yes, so that might be a little bit conservative, but I've only ever seen 2, so maybe that's 20% of the cuckoos in the band. Or I guess, well, 10% if there's 10 breeding pairs. And then they're federally protected. So please don't use playback or otherwise harass cuckoos in Nevada. It is against the law. If you are, though, lucky enough to see or hear a yellow-billed cuckoo in Nevada, please notify the appropriate state and federal wildlife agencies, because we use publicly sourced data too to help design our surveys. It might be possible that if people start discovering cuckoos in a certain part of the state, Nevada is a big state and there's only so many biologists. If the public can help and let us know about sightings, we can help design a survey protocol for that area. Right now, surveys are concentrated on the Carson, the Walker, the Virgin River, the Paranagit Valley, and Las Vegas Wash. So if you're not in one of those places, that's especially helpful data. And then this kind of just correlates to the playback and harassing cuckoos. Please be mindful about posting your sighting on eBird or social media, because sometimes there might be people that if you do provide an exact location, they might not follow the rules and go harass that cuckoo. So we do want to take it pretty seriously that these birds are protected and very rare in Nevada. But one thing that I loved about doing the cuckoo surveys is that we saw all sorts of neat stuff out there, not just cuckoos. And I think we were out there 3 different days, and by the time I had made my checklist, we had seen 75 species. But we also saw some really neat other stuff, like these cross sand puffs, which Cryptorachilix crux multi. Maybe I said that right. It used to be called Kellogg sand verbena, but it's endemic to Nevada there's also one population in Lassen County, California, but it's a pretty rare plant. So I was excited that we found that, and it was in full bloom in July of last year. We also saw some great horned owl fledglings. Those are actually the ones I managed to Vale Park, but whatever, no one has to know except y'all. I had a better picture that I took at those, so I was like, I'll use that there. And then we did see a lot of monarch butterflies, which is super exciting because that's also a candidate species for listing under the Endangered Species Act. So stay tuned. 2024 is the deadline for that. Let's see. I think that's really the highlights for me tonight. I do have plenty of time for questions or comments from the audience. I really appreciated y'all tonight. And again, my business card is in the back if you want to get in touch or have any comments or concerns. We do, we're here, we're servants to the public. We want to hear your input, and we're very interested in anything that y'all have to say. So thank y'all for having me tonight.